He was supposed to die that night. A young dog, maybe 9 months old, lay twisted and broken beside a narrow forest road. His fur, once golden, was soaked in rain and clung to his thin frame, one leg bent unnaturally beneath him, his ribs pushing through skin stretched tight. The cold had already settled and creeping and into every breath, every shallow rise and fallow his chest. No collar, no tags, no one searching. Someone had let him go. Or worse, someone had never wanted him a towel. He'd been hit badly, the tire traction, the gravel showed it had happened quickly. The vehicle didn't stop, had dragged himself a few feet from the road before collapsing for nearly 24 hours. He hadn't moved, no food, no water, no warmth. Still he was alive because he wasn't alone. Beside him, close enough to feel but never touching, sat a bobcat, young 5 months maybe. Her fur was thick and speckled, the color of frost dusted earth. Her eyes were silver gray, watchful and calm. She wasn't helping him. She wasn't threatening. She just stayed predators. Don't of this, not in the wild, not when injured pre lies, defenseless, not when hunger sold guide every instinct. But she hadn't moved. She waited as the light faded, as wind brushed over their small corner of nowhere, as night sank its teeth into the forest. She didn't search for food, didn't seek shelter. She simply sat beside him, breath steady, body lowers, twitching at every sound, not protecting, not fleeing, just there as if somehow she knew he shouldn't be alone. David was the kind of man who had once lived in noise, city lights, tight deadlines, and crowded elevators, but a laugh that had faded years ago. After Thelos of someone he loved, he left it behind. Built a quiet life at the edge of Thefrist in a hand-hewn cabin, where Thuan spoke louder than people did. There was no traffic here, no signal on his phone, just the rhythm of trees swaying and firewood splitting beneath his hands. Rarely left his land anymore, grasseries once a month fuel when he had but that morning something pulled him off. His usual route, the straight road home, didn't feel right, and he couldn't text Lane why, so he took a turn, an older road, narrower, with grass growing through its cracks and silence pressing in from all sides. The forest closed in around him, mist hovered low over the ground. The tires of his truck whispered along through it, gravel. That's when he saw her, a bobcat, standing dead center on the roadus. First instinct was caution. Wild animals don't linger like that, but she didn't bolt. Instead, she began to move slow. Tight circles in front of the trucker body, low tail flicking like a signal. She was trying to be seen. Then he noticed what lay behind her, a dog crumpled in the leaves. Unmoving, Davis' foot found the brake. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This couldn't be what it looked like. Was the bobcat hunting Wasit, protecting a kill? He stepped out slowly, not even closing the door behind him. The bobcat didn't run. She stood her ground, not aggressive, not afraid, just there. He approached carefully, heart beating louder. Then his footsteps. The bobcat was trembling, her ears twitching, breath visible in the cold morning air, but still she stayed. The dog didn't move except for his eyes. Those eyes locked onto David's the moment he got close. They didn't plead, they didn't panic, they waited. Both of them did. The dog ways a live, broken but not gone. His breathing was thin, uneven, but steady. One leg was swollen and bent, the fur around it matted with blood, but his eyes were clear, focused, quiet. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just looked at David, unblinking, as if trying to speak without sound, asking something that had no words. There were no clinics nearby, no shelter, no one to call. David knew these woods too well to waste time hoping for help. It wouldn't come. He crouched, slowly speaking in a low voice. He used only 4 scared animals and ghosts. Carefully held his arms beneath the dog's fragile body, feeling the tremble in each limb. The weight was nothing but the still knee show still. The dog was made every step feel heavier. The bobcat didn't move. She stood where she was, watching, her tail flicked once, then stilled. She wasn't his problems, was wild, dangerous maybe, but she made no sound, just watched as he placed dog gently. On the back seat of Thetrak, he got in, closed the door, turned at the key. The engine roared to life, breaking the silence, the tires gripped. Rode through the mirror movement, the Bobcat running straight down the middle off the road, her legs stretched in. Full sprint, not veering into the woods, not hesitating. Following, David's hands tightened on the wheel. What was she doing? Why was she still here? He stopped at the truck. She froze in place just yards away. Her sides rose and fell, with each breath's tongue out. Breath visible in thick old air, but she didn't turn back, head drove again. She ran again. Second time break. She stopped, eyes locked on him, waiting. He didn't know what this was, didn't know what to make of it, but something in her eyes. Something raw-willed, strangely loyal, unsettled him, checkered for the dog, for what happened next. Third time he stopped. He didn't move, just reached over and opened the passenger's side door. She didn't hesitateth. Bobcat leaped in silent without fear and curled herself. Beside the engine edge, as if she had always belonged, their cabin was quiet, wrapped in the hush-off deep forest and early frost inside. David worked with the same hands he once says to build this place, steady, deliberate, patient. He cleaned the wound set. A splint on the leg laid the dog Oscar, he had started calling him, on a soft blanket near the wood stove where warmth could reach through. The chill thought clung to his bones. Oscar barrel-listered. He slept for hours at a time, laced in pain and exhaustion. But he was alone, and he wasn't alone, the Bobcat Scarlet. Though he hadn't dared call her that out loud just yet, stayed close. Shouldn't come inside, not fully, but... David left the door to the covered porch open, and she made that space her own from her. She watched everything, she never wandered far while Oscar slept. She lingered near the glass door facing him when he whimpered in pain. She stood and pressed gently against the screen, low and alert, and when David brought her food, she barely touched. It was Oscar. Watched Oscar, she followed at nights to bring things, sticks, bits of barcons, even the skull of a small animal in place, them near the door. Smalfring's unclear gifts, and sometimes David opened the porch door. Let'n't Bobcat step inside. Just a little shoe would lie down beside the dog, close on, that her side brushed his no-grolls, no tension. Just silent understanding. She was wild, untamed. She'dn't seek affection, she'd never asked for trust, but she chose to stay. Days turned into weeks, the stiffness in Oscar's leg began to ease his walk on Sunavin, and painful grew steady. The swelling had down the bone had mended. Hugh was still cautious, still limping at times, but he moved with more strength, more confidence. In Scarlet Wassleways with him their first walks wears low. Just a few steps past the porch down into the yard, where the moss grew thick and soft. David watched from the window as Oscar sniffed at the air, his tail low but wagging a few paces behind. Bobcat followed, not stalking, not circling, just walking with him. Soon they began to explore the edge of the woods. Fallen logs near the stream. Oscar will dash ahead, then look back to see. She followed, she always did when he crouched tail high. Trying to pounce on a peony cone, she mimicked him, flattening her body in mock pursuit. They played. Sometimes Oscar would find an old tennis ball or a stick buried in the brush. Hugh would bring it back, drop it in front, offer a nudge, it forward with his nose, shed bat at once, then twice, then pound, tail twitching with amusement. They took turns like children, and every night they came back. Scarlet didn't return to Thefrist. She stayed within the invisible boundaries of the land, never tied, never confined. She would disappear behind thea trees at dusk, but always reappear before stars took the sky. Thy padding zealantly across the porch to lie near Oscar's bed. She didn't beg for food, shouldn't seek warmth. She chose presentio. For comfort she wasn't a pet, she was thing else, a companion, a shadow, a friend. David hadn't meant to grow attached. He told himself from the beginning that Oscar needed time, space, healing, but nothing more. Still there, Wasamithing, and the dog's quiet resilience signed the way. He leaned gently into David's leg when he rested or followed him. With calm, steady eyes around the cabin, Aquiat bond had formed steady. Unspoken deep, but it wasn't just with the dog. Scarlet had become something else. Not claimed, but present. As if she too had decided that this strange trioman dog, Wildit, was now a kind of Pakascar, and Scarlet were inseparable. One went the other, followed thee. Chased birds through the tall grass-rolled and sun-warmed leaves, they splashed in the shallow creek below, the ridges anding cold water flying into the tree-swan. The heat was too much. They lay side by side in the shade of the pines there. Breathing slow in sync, David Dintenturfer, he sat at a distance, camera in hand, watching them through the lens, documenting moments he didn't understand but knew were rare, even when they wandered far through trails behind Therage or across the meadow. Past the old fence, they always came back. Always tanked their bafars. Didn't end where Davidland did, beyond the trees, lay a small community, spread out cabins, old mailboxes, and weathered faces. That remembered every stranger the people other lived. Quiet lives too, but not quiet enough to ignore what they began to see. A dog running freely in Basidium. A bobcat at first, there was confusion, then concern, then fear on evening. A man appeared at David's porch, a neighbor not close but familiar enough. You? Do you understand? He said, voice sharp and low, that you're keeping a wild predator in your yard. David did answer. Right away the man's boot scraped against the wood. His eyes flicked toward the trees, toward the movement. Just out of sight, you're pitting everyone at risk. The neighbor commented. Especially kids, you need to do something before someone else does. David nodded once, slowly he could feel. Wait, in those words the storm was coming, and it wouldn't wait quietly. David tried, he spoke carefully, calmly told them what he'd seen, what he'd lived, down alongside that. This wasn't just a wild animal stalking through backyards. Pawthos was different, that she had chosen to stay, that she had shown no signs of aggression, that she was bonded somehow to the dog, to the land, to this strange life they had built together, but fearless hands only to itself. She's a Bobcat neighbor, snapped their predators. Doesn't belong here, you're responsible. If something happens on a Thurward, you'll either take care of it or so me own. Else will, they told him. Plainlish had to go take her deep into Thewoods, call the wildlife officers, but doit now before. Someone else did before. Was captured, or worse, destroyed avid. Stood on the porch long after they left. The evening air was cold, the sun sank behind the pines. He looked toward the edge of the trees where Oscar lay curled beneath the porch rail, and near him Scarlet. She watched him with Thos' pale, calm eyes, as if she already knew. Heck knelt down, his voice low, rough. He didn't know what he was saying, not really, only thought he needed her to understand. You might need to go, he whispered. It's not safe, not for you, not now. She didn't move, just blinked, still listening. Next morning, before the frost had melted the truck from wildlife services arrived, David stepped outside to meet them, heart-pounding. Oscar barked once, heart confused, but Scarlet was gone. No sound, no trace, no sign in the dew or sedart. She had vanished into the forest as if she'd understood every word. The officers from Wildlife Services stood on David's porch, longer than he expected. They were calm but firm eyes, scanning. Tree and rifles slung over shoulders, more as warning than necessity. They asked questions. About sightings, about behavior, about risk, David. And swear to Varian, he told them everything, how he had found the dog broken on the roadside, how the bobcat had stayed by his side, refusing to leave. How she followed Theme home, how she never showed a single ounce of aggression, not toward him, not toward Oscar, not toward anything. She was never mean, he said quietly. She always had a choice. She could have gone 100 times, but she stayed, and now she hadn't. The Nada took their notes, left to Cardiff. She comes back, one of them said, Yanid, to call immediately. David nodded, then watched as their truck disappeared down the long rutted dead road, leaving on Lieselance behind. He and Oscar were Alania game. The house felt different now, heavier, quieter in the wrong ways. Oscar lay by the porch door, most of the Danos pressed to the glass, eyes trained in the trees. Every rustle of Levisivery's shifting shadow made his ears twitch, but no paw steps came, no flick for spotted tail, no silver gaze returning his stare. He didn't play, he didn't run hard, ate slowly, half-heartedly, and spent this nights pacing the edge of the yard, pausing often to sniff at the earth where she used to lie. He whimpered in his sleep. Some atomismal broken sounds David had never heard from him before. The bond they'd shared hadn't been imagined, not by David, and certainly not by the dog who now wandered the forest's edge as if looking for something just beyond his reach. They had all lost something, and the quiet between them said so in the weeks that followed. David and Oscar grew inseparable without Scarlet between them. Fear bond deepened in quiet, unspoken ways. Oscar began sleeping at David's feet, rising when he rose, watching his every movement with calm loyalty. He was no longer just a dog someone had thrown away. He was David's dog now. They highlighted each other, filling the silence Scarlet had left behind. But even in those still moments, David could feel it in Emptonshire. Something wild used to be. Then on the 22nd evening, just as the sun had slipped behind the trees and the world turned to shadow, David caught a shape moving at the edge of the yard. At first didn't believe it, thought it was Mamori playing tricks, but the shape moved again, slowly, deliberately, step by fragile, step low to the ground, head lowered, breath short. It was her Scarlet. David's heart clenched. He dropped the axe he was carrying and walked toward her, fast then slower, as he saw her closer. She was thinner than before. Her fur was rougher. There was a shallow cut along her side, fresh red like a claw mark from a fight she hadn't chosen but thought and lost. And yet she had come back Totham to the only place she had ever been safe. She didn't growl, didn't flinch. She looked at him and then passed him toward porch, toward the light, toward the Doug, who was already sitting upright, alert and trembling. David didn't set. He opened the gate and led her quietly to the back of the property, out of view from the road, from the eyes that had threatened to take her before that night. Scarlet curled beside Oscar likes had never left. He leaned into her, immediately resting his head against her side, and she led him together. They slept. David sat on the porch in the dark, watching them, listening to their steady breathing, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel the weight of absence pressing down in the house. But as he looked out in the blackness beyond his land, a question echoed through his mind. What? No. Scarlet healed quickly. The wound along her side closed within days, and the strength returned to her step, almost Osif. The forest itself had poured life back into her, but she didn't stay. She was wild. Always had been the woods where her true home. And so after a few nights beneath the porch and quiet mornings with Oscar, she disappeared again into the trees. But this time she came back, not every day, not always close, but often, and now that David no longer questioned it. She would appear at the edge of the clearing or near the trail where the sun broke through the canopy, silent, watching, never asking for anything, just mackings her. They were still there to avoid the whispers of neighbors. David didn't let her return to the house. Instead, he built something deeper in the woods. Past their edge, far from the nearest road, a simple wooden shelter open to the wind, and desky inside. Brought Oscar's old toys, blankets, even a food dish, though Scarlet rarely touched it. He and Oscar would hike there often, sit for hours. Sometimes Scarlet joined them, her movement soft and slow, her eyes full of calm, shed lie near them, sometimes brushing her side against Oscar's back, sometimes dozing in the sunlight. Wild. David sat reading beside her. That place, Beckham, there's a quiet corner of Theforest, untouched by fear, by judgment, by anything except the strange steady gravity of love. A young bobcat, while Dontum done invited, had saved a broken dog, and in doing so had given David a friend, a reason to trust again. A story no one would believe except those who had lived it in this forest. Something had shifted. Don't day. The predator didn't run one day. Hunted didn't hide one day. Love didn't follow rules sometimes. It's just a bobcat and a dog who chose to stay in when they could have walked away. If this story moved you, share it with some yon. Let others feel what Scarlet and Oscar reminded us, that love doesn't need a reason. Subscribe to Hope and Fur for more real stories of the wild, the brave, and the bonds that change everything.